everyone! Welcome to Cherry Clips. Today, I'll be sharing a touching movie named Man in Love. Tommy is a low-level thug. He goes around the streets of his neighborhood collecting debts for a loan shark. He is crucial to both others and himself. One day, he is collecting rent from a shop owner. Hearing that the shop owner can't afford the money, he takes out a bottle of gasoline and has a few swallows of it. He asks the shop owner to drink too and says they can die together. Being shocked and scared, the shop owner hands over some money, including his shop rent and kids' tuition. But he takes a stack of money out and says,
애들 학원비라며 공부를 시켜야 될 거 아니야.
After leaving the shop, he begins to vomit all over the ground. Tommy is righteous and does well at his job, so he enjoys a high status in the small gang he works for, only inferior to his boss. One day, the boss receives a call. It turns out that his men run into a tricky business in a hospital, so the boss asks Tommy to help them as usual. Tommy arrives at the hospital and rebukes his men for their incompetence. Then he comes to a ward and meets the debtor's daughter, Heidi. Tommy is enchanted by Heidi at first sight. Heidi's father is in a coma. His illness is so serious that he hardly even survives, let alone pay off his loan. So Tommy has to force Heidi to sign a contract to help her father pay the debt. Heidi rejected indignantly. Then Tommy violently throws the contract at her father on the bed. Seeing Heidi insist not to sign it, he begins to disarm her father's oxygen cylinder. In Heidi's eyes, Tommy is a demonic villain. She has no choice but to finally sign the contract with 49% monthly interest. Looking at depressed Heidi, Tommy is seized with a feeling of compassion. The next day, he finds Heidi and wants to help her. Because he seldom has contact with girls, he is not very good with words. He jokingly says to Heidi,
사람은 콩팥 하나만 있어도 사는 데는 아무리 문제가 없거든. 그게 왜 두 개인 줄 알아? 이식하라고.
Obviously, Heidi misunderstands him and takes it for a threat. She tells Tommy she will pay back before the deadline and then leaves angrily. Tommy is confused. He doesn't know what's wrong with her. The next day, Tommy comes to the hospital again. He finds the treatment expense of Heidi's father is extremely high. She still owes the hospital for her father's hospitalization expenses. It is beyond her capacity to pay back the loan now. Out of compassion and his special feelings to her, Tommy decides to help her. Then he comes back to the gang and finds out Heidi's contract. He tells his boss he wants to be in charge of her deal. The boss understands his thoughts. He not only readily agrees, but also deducts her interest. Tommy is really a naive man. He wants to date Heidi, so he draws dozens of boxes on the paper. For every hour they meet per day, he'll color these boxes. If all the boxes are filled, her debt will be paid off. Heidi rejects him at first, but she has no choice now, because she can't afford her father's treatment expenses, let alone repay the loan. So she calls Tommy and agrees at last, but she says they can only take walks and have chats. Hearing that, Tommy replied, "Does it make sense to deduct the interest for chit-chats?" Heidi misunderstands him again. At night, Tommy comes to the hospital and finds Heidi. Besides walking and chatting, he says he wants to have meals and drink together. At last, Heidi agrees. Looking at Tommy, who is awkward, she asks,
저기요, 나 좋아해요?
or is this a new way of threatening? Tommy is embarrassed and doesn't know what to say. In the following days, they begin to date 1 hour once a day. They eat and take walks together. Tommy also sends her gifts and accompanies her to work. At the same time, Tommy begins to pay attention to his appearance. He buys new clothes and cuts his hair, though his taste is totally bad. However, all these are torments for Heidi. Every time they have meals together, she never eats. She doesn't talk to him when they walk together. She is also embarrassed to receive his gifts in front of her colleagues. However, things are beginning to change. One day, Heidi sees Tommy is taking care of her father in the ward. He keeps talking with him. flipped the other way. You still got it. Good for a son or two. Later, Heidi has meals with him with delight. Unlike before, she moves her chopsticks to eat. When Tommy puts food on her plate, she doesn't reject it. Then their relationship begins to change. In the following days, though Tommy sometimes does something to make Heidi unhappy, they get closer and closer and behave like a couple. However, the trust and relationship they have established are destroyed later. Tommy is in charge of collecting loans of shop owners in the market. Unlike others, all of the debtors deeply trust him. Because Tommy never gives them a hard time, he even helps them when they have difficulties. However, one day, his colleagues come to the market and hit some shop owners. Because Tommy has spent so much time with Heidi recently, he didn't collect the loans in time. So his boss alerts him to focus on his work this way. Irritated by his colleagues' evil doing, Tommy relapses and wrestles with them. At this time, Heidi passes by and catches sight of this atrocious scene. It makes Heidi recall the day when she was forced by him. She sadly realizes that Tommy is always a thug. When she goes to the hospital after work, she finds Tommy is reading her father the comic Saint Seiya. Now, he looks totally different from the person she saw in the market. A feeling of being deceived wells up inside her. She decides to cut off all ties with him. But Tommy has no idea what he did wrong. In order to remedy their relationship, Tommy makes a confession to Heidi.
사랑한다고.
However, Heidi replies coldly.
돈 갚을 테니까 다시는 찾아오지.
Then, they don't contact each other in the following days. Later, he hears from his colleague that Heidi's father passed away today. Then he hurriedly comes to the funeral. After leaving a stack of money, he finds none of Heidi's relatives attend the funeral. Tommy kneels before her father's portrait out of etiquette. Then he calls some shop owners and invites them to the funeral. When they ask him who passed away,
우리 집안 어르신이 같이 하셔.
he is so busy serving those guests pretending to be his son-in-law. Thus, Heidi's father enjoys his last esteem in his life. After the funeral, Heidi thinks something through. At the rooftop, she asks Tommy.
그럼 내가 좋아요?
It makes Tommy shy. But finally, Tommy admits, and they become lovers. This is the first time Tommy has had a girlfriend. He often makes stupid mistakes during their dates. Later, they live together. Heidi thinks Tommy is the gift her father takes to her, so she really cherishes their relationship. Heidi wants to open a chicken shop with her father's insurance benefit. She even begins to imagine their wedding, their kids, and their future life. But she has only one requirement. She wishes Tommy won't associate with those thugs. Tommy also wants to lead a stable and peaceful life, so he tells his boss he wants to quit. However, his boss is plotting a big gamble and invites him to join in. Tommy rejects. He says he'll quit after sorting all the loans. So in later work, in order to collect the loans as quickly as possible, Tommy becomes less lenient than before. However, one time while he is sorting loans, he goes into convulsions, foaming at the mouth. Then the doctor tells him that there is a tumor in his brain. The treatment is also very expensive. At night, Heidi happily takes out the passbook and decides to select a shop the next day. However, after consulting, they realize that their money can hardly afford the rent of the shop, even in a remote location. Tommy knows Heidi really wants to open a shop in the best spot, so he decides to join the gamble with all his savings of $30 million. Though risky and dangerous, once it's successful, he can rent that shop and give her a happy life in the future. At night, he asks Heidi to negotiate with the landlord of that shop and promises he can afford the money. It is the same day when Tommy attends the gamble and Heidi meets with the landlord. If everything goes well, he can come sign the contract with the money gambled. However, halfway through the gamble, a gang of masked robbers abruptly breaks in and takes away all the money. Tommy's boss escapes under protection in the confusion. Tommy wrestles with those robbers and tears off one's mask. He finds that the robber is his colleague. He realizes that he is cheated by his boss because his usefulness has been played out. Not only did he not get any money, but he lost all his savings. Looking at the empty office, Tommy is extremely low. He comes to a bistro and drinks alone. Heidi finds him. Seeing Tommy is drinking with wounds all over his body, she interrogates him. Explain where you were, why you couldn't come. You promised me. You said you won't see them. Facing Heidi's interrogation, Tommy says the words he regrets forever.
나 이거 원래 이런 새끼인지 몰랐어?
At that time, Tommy is terribly upset. He has a fight with others in the bistro merely for trifles. Then he is sentenced to 3 years for violent assaults. 2 years later, he is released early because of his illness. One time, when he comes across Heidi again, Heidi coldly tells him,
여기는 어떻게 알고 온 거야?
Tommy knows his days are numbered because he has frequent convulsions. So after knowing from the police his former boss established a factory, Tommy pays a visit to the boss and tells him he wants his money. However, the boss totally ignores his request. Tommy is so angry that he decides to fight with the boss. Finally, he is locked by his boss in the cold storage. Suffering from the extreme cold, he is half dead. In desperation, Tommy gives up his dignity. He kneels on the ground and begs his boss to return his money. He tells his boss that he is dying and hopes he can give him his money. Fortunately, the boss returns his money. But when Tommy gives the money to Heidi, Heidi misunderstands him again and thinks that it's dirty money. She throws the money in Tommy's face and walks away without looking back. Later, Tommy comes to Heidi's on the anniversary of the death of Heidi's father. He tells Heidi he won't come to see her because he will leave this city. Later, as he is leaving on the bus, he sees Heidi going on a blind date. He worries about her safety, so he gets off the bus and follows them. He finds her potential date is gentle and elegant, better than himself. Seeing them laughing and talking happily, Tommy smiles with relief. He knows there will be a good man who can give her a happy life. However, he hadn't gone but a few steps when he suddenly feels ill. Then he faints on the roadside. When he wakes up, he finds he is in the hospital. He finds Heidi has signed her name as his guardian on the medical records. At night, Tommy drinks alone at the bistro. When he comes out, Heidi appears in front of him. She now knows everything from the police. Until now, she hadn't realized that Tommy has been suffering extreme pain. She also realizes how ruthless she was. Heidi gives him a bow. That's what she owes to him. Tommy cries heartbrokenly. Feelings of resignation, grievance, and reluctance all break out at this moment. Later, Heidi accompanies him for treatment. She also reads him Saint Seiya at the rooftop. One day, when she is cleaning Tommy's body, she finds he has passed away. Before, Tommy attended her father's funeral as her husband. This time, Heidi attends his funeral as his wife. Look at Heidi. Tommy's father recalls his last conversation with Tommy.
나 사실 장가 갈 뻔했었다. 근데 내가 다 망쳤어. 씨발. 얼굴도 이쁘고 완전히 효녀야. 지 아버지 몸져 누워 있을 때도 오랫동안 병수발 했었어. 그런 애한테 어떻게 내 병수발까지 하라고 그래. 그냥 돈이나 왕창 갖다 주고 사라질라 그랬는데 나 없어도 걔 만나면 잘해줘야 돼 아버지. 걔가 아버지가 없어. 그러니까 아버지가 아버지 좀 해줘. 아버지 아들이 진짜 사랑하는 여자야.
That's all for today's movie. See you next time.